Welcome back, family. We're here with part 2 of our garden bed build. In part 1, we constructed our garden bed, which you can see right here. A key element to ensuring the success of our build was that we used quality wood, meaning there were minimal splits, bows, or other defects. So when you're in the store shopping for wood, make sure you are inspecting that wood and not selecting pieces with defects. Now, if you get home and realize that there is a slight problem with your wood, just be mindful in where you're placing that wood during your build. For instance, if there's a bow, you want to place the convex side of that bow facing the interior of the garden bed. That way, when we add our soil, that pressure from the soil will kind of push out the sides of the bed, hopefully encouraging the wood to straighten. Speaking of soil, we're going to be all about it here in part 2 because we're actually filling our garden bed and then the grand finale, planting our fruits and vegetables. To get started, we'll obviously begin with step 1, but we'll also introduce step 2 because they go hand in hand. For step 1, we're leveling the ground inside of our garden bed with the actual bed itself. This is essential because step 2 consists of securing hardware cloth to the bottom of the garden bed. It is important for the interior ground and bottom of the bed to be level so that there is no pressure being applied to the hardware cloth, which could lead to it becoming unsecured. For instance, if the ground has mounds, they will push the hardware cloth up, potentially unsecuring it from the bed. If the ground has divots, the weight of our soil could cause the hardware cloth to sag into those divots, pulling the hardware cloth down and potentially unsecuring it from the bed. Now that our ground is nice and even with the bottom of our garden bed, it is time for step 2, adding on our hardware cloth. Now this is an optional step, but we're going to do it because it helps to prevent moles, voles, gophers, or other ground critters from entering through the base of your garden bed. We definitely wanted to do this before adding our soil, obviously. And we're not certain that we have these ground critters in our yard, but we want it to be safe versus being sorry. We'll start by flipping the garden bed upside down so that the bottom is facing up. Next, we'll roll out the hardware cloth over the base of the bed and cut it, leaving excess for us to staple. We'll make an exact trim later. The width of our roll is 36 inches. Since our bed is 48 inches, we'll use 2 rolls and attach them together. You can use tin snips to cut the hardware cloth, but for ease, we're going to try using a spiral saw with a metal cutting blade. We'll secure the hardware cloth directly to the base of the bed using a stapler and poultry net staples. We're using 1/2-inch hardware cloth that is galvanized for durability with 19 gauge wire. This will deter ground critters from chewing through or accessing the base of our bed. However, the 1/2-inch spaced squares will allow our smaller bugs and insects that are healthy for our soil, such as earthworms, to make their way through. We initially wanted to staple the hardware cloth to the interior of the garden bed. However, if determined enough, the ground critters could work their way between the interior walls and the hardware cloth. Therefore, we decided to staple it directly to the base of the bed. We mentioned that we'd attach our 2 pieces of hardware cloth together. We accomplished this by using a piece of wire that was packaged with the hardware cloth. We threaded the wire in between the 2 pieces, binding them together. Next, we trim off the excess. We recommend using gloves when handling hardware cloth because it can be sharp. Our hardware cloth is on. We hammered down the sides, the edges, so that when we go to pick this thing back up, we don't get stabbed or probed. So now we just need to flip it over and then it'll be time to fill it up. Just in case y'all were wondering, this bed is quite heavy. Raja was strong enough to lift it from any position. Me, not so much. So we took our time and found some props to help out. Know your abilities and always remember to be safe.
Good.
It's a new day, but we're picking up right where we left off with step 3, backfilling. Now, we said that we'd be all about soil here in part 2, and that's because we're using lots of it. Our first use case is going to be to take our soil and backfill, which means that we are looking to close any remaining gaps that we may have between the base of our bed and our hardware cloth along with the ground. So this is our final step in ensuring that everything is nice and level. Now that everything is completely level, it's time for step 4, sheet mulching. Sheet mulching consists of taking cardboard and laying it at the bottom of your garden bed. This is to prevent any grass or weeds from growing within. Now, in our particular case, we are going to be adding 18 to 20 inches of soil next, and that should smother any unwanted vegetation. However, we want to be safe versus being sorry. Now, some people tend to use garden weed barriers such as landscape fabric instead of the cardboard. However, those things are often made of materials that don't decompose. Our cardboard here is going to decompose over time, allowing our good bugs and insects, such as our friends the earthworms, to make their way through. One final thing that you want to remember before putting down your cardboard is to remove any tape or labels, making it bare so that it will properly decompose. Stop. We always let them rip up cardboard. Hey, we need this one. Back up. Can't have anything. We do normally let them rip it, so. No, bud, I don't need help. Thank you. Step 5, we're filling up the garden bed. Now you can use your native soil, but we actually purchased 1 yard of topsoil from a local landscaping company. And we're hoping that this fills up about half of our raised garden bed. Plant roots typically only grow about 10 to 12 inches deep, which is why for the bottom half of our garden bed, we solely filled it using topsoil. Now, for the second half, the portion in which our plants will actually come into contact with, we are going to fill it using a layered combination of compost and soil amendments. These are higher in quality and they contain benefits that will actually help promote healthy soil as well as plant growth. Our layered combination consists of compost, coconut coir, worm castings, and azomite. Now, we're going to repeat this combination once, giving us a total of 2 combined layers. You may be wondering why we're being so particular with how we're filling our garden beds. And it's because our soil is the foundation for strong and healthy plants. We are striving to have good aeration while retaining moisture and nutrients. We purchased our compost from another local company named Veteran Compost because they have an equally great mission and product. They exist to employ veterans and their families, and they turn food scraps into high quality compost. Now, compost is great because it can hold 2 to 3 times its weight in water, which means it will help us retain moisture. Compost also contains beneficial microbes that help prevent certain plant diseases while stimulating plant growth. It consists of both macro and micronutrients and other trace minerals. The compost from Veteran Compost is screened to 1/2 inch and is generally chunkier than what is sold in most stores. This compost aids in inoculating the soil, it improves the condition of the soil, and it eventually breaks down into a fine humus, promoting long-term soil health. If you too would like to support Veteran Compost, visit their website at veterancompost.com. Coconut coir, also referred to as cocoa coir, is a natural fiber retrieved from a coconut's husk. Its purpose within our bed is to help aerate our soil while retaining moisture. Coconut coir comes in a compressed package and you'll need to add water to separate it. It's completely sustainable, meaning that it doesn't break down quickly. Therefore, you don't have to replace it as often as other organic materials. It's also worth noting that its pH level is close to neutral. Worm castings help attract our dear friends, the earthworms, which we love because the earthworms help increase the amount of air and water that make their way through our soil. Earthworms also leave behind, yeah, you guessed it, more worm castings. Worm castings, aka worm poop, is a great soil enricher and food for your plants, helping them absorb nutrients. Other fertilizers can contain too much nitrogen and burn your plant's roots, but castings will never burn your plants. Lastly, we'll sprinkle on azomite, which is basically rock dust that contains minerals and trace elements which are good for our garden.
After each layer, we raked everything together. When raking, make sure you don't compact your soil. We want it to stay nice and loose so that our plant roots can make their way through.
You guys, check out our bed right here behind me. We've got it all filled up and it's looking so nutrient rich. Oh my gosh. Our last step is we're going to add some water and then we'll be ready to plant.
We were originally going to have 2 parts and therefore 2 videos, but we decided to split this one up. So this concludes part 2, and in part 3, we are going to plant our fruits and vegetables. Love y'all, family, and as always, be blessed.